Steam curls from a fresh slice of homemade pie, cinnamon floating on the air like a harmless lullaby. Across the kitchen table, a silver-haired woman in a polka-dot dress watches you lift the fork. Her cheeks are dimpled, her eyes kind. Yet something flickers behind that smile, something colder than the aluminum tin between you. One bite later, the room tilts, your pulse hammers, and her quiet giggle follows you down a narrowing tunnel of sound. How did love, lace, and laughter become the deadliest recipe in American history? Keep listening. You're about to taste the truth. Blue Mountain, Alabama, baked under a July sun, but the Hazel farmhouse felt colder than any cellar. James Hazel ruled it with a belt and a glare, yanking his 5 children from school to dig rows in red clay. One November evening in 1912, 7-year-old Nannie rode the Southern Railway beside her mother. The engine braked hard, flinging her small skull against a metal seat back. She blacked out, then woke to ringing ears and a doctor who shrugged. The headaches never left. Shut inside her room after fieldwork, Nannie copied sentences from forbidden romance magazines onto feed sack scraps. Each pulp hero promised escape, a husband who listened, a porch without shouting, a world outside cotton dust. The more her father barked, the brighter those paper princes glowed. By 16, she seized the first real chance. Charlie Bragg's quiet loom tender at the linen mill offered a ring and, most important, distance from her father's fists. They married in 1921. Nannie stuffed her treasured clippings into a battered suitcase, certain the fairy tale had begun. Yet the carriage to freedom came with a chaperone. Charlie's domineering mother, who moved in, inspected every plate and hissed at Nannie's silly stories. Days blurred into factory steam and nights of slammed doors. The headaches spiked, the magazine pages yellowed, and Nannie's smile stiffened like cooling syrup. She told herself real love was still out there, just one spoonful away. Fog clung to the porch rail as Nannie ladled oatmeal for her 4 little girls. She sweetened each bowl, humming a lullaby that masked the faint bitterness no child would question. Hours later, 2 daughters doubled over with cramps so fierce they couldn't cry. Doctors labeled it summer stomach flu. Tiny coffins followed, white as linen, while neighbors murmured prayers and blamed spoiled milk. Charlie staggered beneath grief and suspicion. He noticed Nannie's sudden lightness, the quick trip to the insurance office, the smile that flickered when she thought no one watched. Yet he grappled with an unthinkable idea. Who imagines a mother poisoning her own children? Autumn crept in, and another breakfast carried the same sweet scent. Charlie refused to eat, pretending a headache while Nannie's eyes narrowed. That evening, he fled with their eldest, Melvina, leaving baby Florine asleep in her crib. In his pocket, he carried nothing but loose change and dread. A year later, a sealed envelope reached the Calhoun County Sheriff. Inside, a single sentence penciled in nervous strokes. The spoon was her weapon. No name, no return address. Deputies shrugged and filed it away. Decades later, DNA tests traced the saliva on that stamp to a surviving relative who still refuses to speak. Florine grew silent, reading her mother's face for storms. Nannie baked pies for funerals, wiped dry eyes, and told neighbors God had his reasons. The community nodded, because believing otherwise meant letting darkness inside the nursery. Meanwhile, Nannie clipped another romance ad, the paper trembling ever so slightly in her hands. Somewhere out there, she believed, another knight waited, one who wouldn't see the arsenic glinting beneath her smile. But the unsigned letter hadn't said which spoon. Tulsa, 1945. War banners were coming down, but inside St. John's maternity ward, a different battle unfolded. Melvina, Nannie's eldest, drifted in and out of ether dreams as nurses stitched and swaddled. Through the haze, she fixed on her mother's silhouette, polka-dot dress, hair pinned neat, leaning over the bassinet. Nannie's hand rose, glinting. A hat pin? The point hovered, then vanished behind the baby's head. A thin cry broke, then silence. Doctors called it asphyxia, etiology unknown. Paperwork stacked faster than questions. The newborn was buried before Melvina could trust her own memory. She told staff what she thought she'd seen. One nurse jotted a note, bagged the pin, and logged it as evidence. That affidavit later vanished from the hospital's records room, along with the pin itself. Grief welded mother and daughter together for a moment. Then came another argument, sharp as broken glass. Melvina stormed out, leaving toddler Robert with his grandmother. When she returned, the child lay lifeless in his crib. Nannie claimed he'd simply stopped breathing. Melvina noticed an insurance receipt peeking from Nannie's apron pocket, the ink still wet. Reports list Robert's death as sudden infant respiratory failure. No autopsy, no second look. Melvina packed a suitcase and fled the state, replaying the vision of that hat pin with every mile. Online threads today still chase that missing affidavit. Some users claim a nurse confessed on her deathbed that the pin was coated in something that smelled like almonds. Others insist the whole story is wartime rumor chasing clicks. The hospital's chain of custody card, declassified into 2024, shows a final stamped instruction: destroy 1964. No signature. And tucked in an archived Tulsa Tribune sidebar is a single cryptic line: woman in polka dots buys sewing needles by the dozen. But the receipt trail stops at a shop that burned down in '49. Perhaps the flames hid more than charred lace pins, and one nurse's note still whispers from the ashes. Jacksonville, 1945. Victory parades roared downtown while Nannie's second husband, Frank Harrelson, celebrated with corn whiskey and threats. Police reports note a fistfight, a broken lamp, a neighbor's frightened 911 call that never made it to court. Days later, Frank lay shivering, skin tinged gray. The doctor blamed liver failure, signed the certificate, and left. Nannie cashed a brand new life insurance policy worth enough to buy a train ticket, and plenty of rat poison for the journey ahead. She traveled light, a suitcase of romance clippings, a vial of arsenic, and an ironclad belief that paperwork protected her better than any pistol. Sister Dovie, bedridden in Gadsden, welcomed Nannie's help. Neighbors smelled pies baking and heard lullabies through open windows. Within a week, Dovie stopped breathing. The county coroner shrugged. Long illness. And Nannie signed for the burial, wiping tears with a flour-dusted apron. Next stop, the Hazel family farmhouse. Mother Lou greeted her wandering daughter with hug and hymn. 2 days later, she clutched her stomach at the breakfast table and never spoke again. No autopsy, no suspicion, just another death certificate slid beneath a fountain pen. Metropolitan Life Ledgers, unsealed after a 2024 FOIA battle, tell the rest. 11 policies linked to Nannie's relatives and late husbands, all signed in shaky, left-slanted script. Handwriting experts call the strokes crudely forged, but the company settled inquiries off record, paid out, and filed the paperwork away. One page shows a blank where a witness signature should sit, a ghost white space amid black ink. Researchers still argue who forged those names. Some suspect a helpful clerk, others a traveling notary who vanished from census rolls in '49. Either way, the money flowed, the coffins closed, and Nannie boarded her next train smiling. Yet the empty witness line yawns like an unfilled grave, waiting for a hand to claim it. Wheat gusted across Emporia, Kansas, when Nannie met Richard Morton, clean-cut, church-going, the kind of steady hero she'd underlined in pulp stories. Within weeks, she wore his ring and arranged new bank signatures. Richard neither drank nor gambled. He merely wrote friendly letters to other women, and that, to Nannie, was betrayal stamped in red. She returned to her trusted ritual. Small doses of arsenic slipped into creamed potatoes, then peach cobbler. Richard wilted over days. Nausea, muscle cramps, a fever no tonic touched. On the 7th morning, he collapsed. The coroner cited myocardial failure, but a young pathology aide noticed metallic streaks on stomach tissue and flagged possible arsenite contamination. The state lab's spectrograph jammed mid-test. Vials were logged for retesting, then signed out by an unknown hand and never seen again. A memo surfaced in 2025. Equipment failure. dispose of samples. The aide wrote a one-line protest, evidence destroyed without retest, and was told to file it and forget it. He kept a carbon copy hidden in his Bible for 70 years. When journalists found him at a nursing home, he whispered they didn't want the numbers. Too many coffins already. Yet the signature authorizing disposal is only an ink impression. No name, no ink, like someone pressed a pen without writing. Nannie, meanwhile, donned a black veil, thanked the town for casseroles, and boarded a train east. In her luggage clinked 2 empty spice tins and 1 folded ad from a Lonely Hearts column. Samuel Doss, widower, Tulsa. She smiled. Another promise waited, but one missing vial still drifts through Kansas files like a ghost eager to speak. Tulsa, September 1954. Reverend Samuel Doss believed order pleased God, so he measured life in ledgers. Lights out at 9, romance magazines banned, spending capped to the penny. Nannie tolerated the rules for 6 weeks, until she secured 2 life insurance policies and joint access to his savings. On an unremarkable Tuesday, she ladled stew, stirred in arsenic, and watched the minister fold over the table. Dr. Frederick Tatum had treated Samuel once before for the same baffling gastric agony. This second collapse felt wrong. He ordered a hospital care, intravenous fluids, observation. Samuel rallied, thanked the staff, and walked out, promising a donation to the children's choir. Nannie welcomed him home with coffee laced twice as strong. Hours later, he convulsed and died. Tatum, a veteran of wartime triage, refused the easy answer of acute digestive illness. He demanded an autopsy and personally escorted tissue samples to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. Toxicologists measured arsenic at 40 times the lethal threshold. A nurse's chart noted, "Spouse giggled during notification." News reached the courthouse before dawn, but somewhere along the chain a second sample vanished. The courier assigned to deliver it would die in a 1962 car crash that left his briefcase missing. OSBI files hint at potential evidence tampering, yet the investigation halted once Nannie confessed. Her arrest photo shows a grandmotherly grin framed by soft curls. Reporters expected tears. Instead, she asked if prison served good pie. Detectives braced for one murder charge, but Nannie had a longer list, and the giggle only grew louder, leaving investigators to wonder just how deep the laughter might go next. Flashbulbs popped across the Tulsa courthouse as Nannie, in a pressed polka dot dress, chirped "Howdy boys" to stunned reporters. Inside the interrogation room, she detailed 11 deaths like recipes, sprinkling laughter between dosages, cheating husbands, dull routines, even banned TV shows. Each motive sounded like a punchline only she found funny. Detectives stared. Pens stalled, while her giggle ricocheted off concrete. Oklahoma charged her only for Samuel's murder. The evidence was ironclad and budgets slim. Other states watched, folders half open, then quietly shut them. A jury never heard about the poisoned oatmeal, the hat pin, the missing vials. In May 1955, she pled guilty and accepted life without parole, asking whether prison gardens allowed roses. Behind walls of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, she crocheted blankets, swapped pie recipes, and posed for reporters who called her the Giggling Granny. A 1956 psych eval labeled her psychopathic personality, absence of remorse, yet one whole page stayed redacted, listing only possible accomplice. Rumors flared. A helpful undertaker, a forged signature clerk, maybe even a lovesick pen pal who mailed the unsigned letter. June 2nd, 1965, leukemia closed her ledger. Guards reported she tried to sit up for one last joke, failed, and whispered, "Now the fun begins." She was buried without a headstone, but OSBI notes hint at a missing interview reel. Last seen in a deputy's desk, gone after a break-in, no alarms recorded. Today, researchers still hunt that tape, the courier's briefcase, the redacted name. Because if someone helped the giggles flow, they vanished like arsenic in coffee. and a missing laugh can still echo after 6 decades, waiting to be heard. Half a century later, archivists still chase the crumbs Nannie scattered. Hoya requests crack open dusty boxes. Each release births new questions. The unsigned 1950 letter, the spoon warning, now sits in a lab freezer. DNA pinned it to a living relative who shuns reporters, but statistical noise leaves room for a second contributor. Which family branch mixed that genetic signature, and what did they know? In North Carolina, volunteers scan charred negatives from the Lexington fire. One blurred frame shows a second figure leaving the house at dawn. Image enhancement tech teases a silhouette. Too short for Arlie, coat hem flapping. Investigators in chat forums argue. Nannie wore dresses, never a coat. So, who walked away from the flames? Oklahoma's missing tissue sample haunts toxicologists. Trace arsenic can survive decades in paraffin blocks, and rumors persist that the vial sits mislabeled in a university basement. Students plan midnight hunts, convinced one glass tube could rewrite the timeline. And every winter, a floral-scented envelope reaches the Tulsa County clerk. Inside, clipped romance headlines, no note, postmark smudged. The clerk files them under Nannie tribute, dusts off her hands, and waits for the next. Somewhere, a pie cools on a windowsill, its steam curling like a question mark. Trust, like cinnamon, sweetens the air, until the first bite answers in silence. The oven door closes, the giggle travels on. The case of Nannie Doss doesn't end with her unmarked grave. Every newly scanned ledger, every declassified memo suggests someone else might have signed, witnessed, or even stirred alongside her. Was it a timid clerk who forged life insurance forms, a nurse who slipped the hat pin into an incinerator, or a distant cousin who sealed an envelope with trembling guilt? We may never pin a name to those shadows, yet their fingerprints linger in half-erased ink and blank lines that refuse to stay silent. Nannie's giggle has faded, but the echo reminds us that evil often hides behind warm smiles and sweet aromas. So the next time comfort smells like cinnamon and trust comes dressed in polka dots, ask yourself, what story hides beneath the crust? If you want more untold truths and buried leads, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Because in our next dive, another quiet legend is waiting to be unmasked.